Many thanks for staying with us right here on Good Morning Kenya. My name is Mike Migwe. We are talking about Vision 26 Beyond Vision 2030. That is a national conversation expected to be launched today at the KICC. But before we get into that conversation, I want to take you through the front pages of our local dailies, and I'll be starting with the Standard. Gachagua bombshell. This is what is reported or captured on the front page of the Standard newspaper. Broken promises, failed plans, soaring debt, corruption, and alleged state-backed killings are some of the things Rigathi Gachagua accuses President William Ruto of perpetrating in a blistering attack. The former deputy president alleged his former boss was presiding over a collapsing economy, trampling on the rule of law and using a revolving door of grand plans to distract Kenyans from 4 years of broken promises. The government leaders, however, dismissed the claims as the thoughts of a leader desperate for publicity. That is what is reported on the front page of the Standard. And you can read that story on page 6 and 7 of the same daily. Moving on to the Daily Nation. 4 wasted years, that is what is being reported on the front page of the Daily Nation. Opposition leader Rigathi Gachagua has issued a harsh assessment of President Ruto's 4 year in office, accusing his administration of reneging on its manifesto pledges and implementing draconian policies. He cited wasteful spending, corruption, and punitive taxes, goons, and abductions as among state excesses. That story is told on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. ODM demands DP slot 50% share of state posts. ODM wants President Ruto to name a party member his running mate in the presidential election and to commit to cede half of government appointments should the coalition win the polls. Read that story on page 6 of the Daily Nation. Students wishing to change varsity courses in distress. That story is told on page 2 of the Daily Nation. Limited university slots frustrate students seeking course transfers. That story is fleshed out on page 2 of the Daily Nation. And finally, on the front page of the Star newspaper, ODM demands 50% of Ruto government and posts and DP posts. That story is told on page 6 of the Star newspaper. IEBC changes ballot paper color codes. Presidential ballot colors will be white. National Assembly will be green. MCA will be brown. Senate yellow. Woman representative purple. Governor sky blue, and referendum grey. We slept in the office. Maura recalls days of Gen Z protests. That story is told on page 3 of the Star newspaper. Set aside 105 million shillings for disappeared victims, court tells government. Read that story on page 2 of the Star newspaper. WAFCON shows growth of African women's football. That story is told on page 14 and 15 of the Star newspaper. And finally, blame yourselves. COB tells governors, or the controller of budget tells governors, as salary crisis hits over 35 counties. That is what is captured on the front pages of our local dailies. And now we move into our conversation that is focusing on the national conversation Beyond Vision 2030. Remember, that is something that will be formally launched today at the Kenyatta International Conference Center. And this is something that the president said that it is the most consequential exercise in national reflection and public participation since the promulgation of a new constitution in 2010. For that conversation in studio, on my far left, I'm joined by Wakili Peter Wasaga, who is an advocate of the High Court. Welcome to Good Morning Kenya.
Good to see you.
I hope you are doing well.
I'm very fine.
Yes.
Good morning, Kenya.
Karibu sana.
Mike.
Karibu sana. And also Purity Mutua, who is a student leader at the University of Nairobi.
Pleasure to be here, Mike. Thank you
Karibu
so
sana,
much.
asante sana. Emmanuel Magoba is a political scientist. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much.
And Franklin Ojiambo is a political analyst and aspiring politician. Thank you for making time.
Asante sana.
Let's get into the conversation. First of all, Wakili, we're talking matters that go beyond 2030. First of all, what do you think of Vision 2060? Are we ready to have this conversation?
Thank you so much, Migui, for having me the set this morning.
Karibu sana.
I'm a believer of the Constitution. I'm a believer of the Word of God. And I'm a believer of the rule of law. When you look at the architect of a country, it's basically the current generation or a given generation holding specific roles, resources in trust for the coming generations. And if I borrow from the good book, they say that where there is no vision, people perish. So it's always important to have a vision, and this vision must stem from the Constitution. You see, the Constitution is the supreme law. And one thing about our new Constitution, that it brought about so many things. It expanded the Bill of Rights. It brought about independent commissions. It brought about or strengthened the national values, which basically is the bedrock of every political decision or every decision. And remember, the law governs everyone. No one is above the law, including the president, the politicians, and even the least among the least, if there is any such definitions. So when we sit down as a country to come up with a vision, we must look at the Constitution. So it must be done within the confines of the Constitution, basically stemming from Article 10, that public participation. And I believe that is why the country is having such conversations, so that they can plan for the future. And number two, we had a Vision 2030. Vision 2030 is ending in just 4 years. In fact, less than 4 years.
Yeah.
So this is just a furtherance of the Vision 2030. Because after Vision 2030, what next? Then number three is we must learn from the past. What are some of the achievements we've had from the Vision 2030, and how best can we further it to achieve the economic prosperity that we've been yearning for, to achieve infrastructural development, social welfare and social development, access to education, access to good infrastructure. We have to compare notes. We have to, the current regime has to give us, because right now they are the custodian. Because you see, like I said, for example, the 2010 Constitution was promulgated by the President of Kenya, by then Moi Kibaki.
Yes.
But you see, the implementation was actually done by those who actually, some of them did not support that Constitution, because it is the law. That is the same thing with Vision 2030. It could be developed as at this point by the current President, William Ruto. But the implementation could be done by my brother, who is an aspiring politician. I said, my name is
Franklin.
Yes. Franklin will be the president tomorrow. And if Franklin is the president, he will be mandated or tasked with the implementation of the Vision 2060, even if he did not support it, because that now becomes part of the part of the policies, part of the documents that have to be referred to, both by the political class, even in their manifestos. They have to structure them. In fact, there should be a very strict guideline so that manifestos borrow heavily from the Vision 2060 or from a given, the vision that is in place at a particular time. So I totally support the discussion of the Vision 2060 because this is the right time to discuss and plan for our future.
Yeah, Purity, still on that, are we ripe for a conversation, given that we are almost at the tail end of Vision 2030? Are we ripe for that conversation, because this regards the development and the future of our country?
I'd like to quote something that Charles Dickens wrote, and it was saying that it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. We are at the backdrop of a severe drop in political trust, and the faith of Kenyans has been crushed consistently over the years. And we are having a conversation on another new plan when in its entirety Vision 2030 was not fully implemented. And so we are at a backdrop where we don't even trust the ones who are initiating the conversation as to what exactly will be different this time. I agree. At the end of the day, we need to have a framework and a plan, but we have a backlog of things that are yet to happen. We have youth development, education, healthcare. The vision bearers of 2030, I believe, would be disappointed at some of the milestones that we have been able to capture. A plan is welcome, but more so action speaks to the youth more than anything else. We are tired of extractive politics, tokenism. Sometimes you might ask, this conversation is quite timely, running down to the election. And so I speak for many to say that there's a lot of doubts as to what the conversation is about at the end of the day. Yeah.
Magoba, what do you think, moving forward towards the end of Vision 2030 and now looking at another 30 years or so, are we ripe for that? Are we ripe for that conversation?
Yeah, I think it's a moment that we need to have these discussions going on. And maybe I'll bring you from a point of history where we've come from. And as Marcus Garvey says, a man without history is like a tree without roots. You find that before you go to Vision 2030, in 1965, we had the sessional paper, which was now aligning Kenya's plan to the African socialism. You remember in the 60s, they were about the Africanization and stuff. And then we moved to economic recovery strategy in 2003 to 2007, which was now to feature on our economic development, of which we haven't achieved as much as we had planned in that strategy. And then I don't know if it was a coincidence, but then in 2008 we are now launching the Vision 2030, which was now to make Kenya a middle income and an industrialized state. So you find that as a country we've been moving, and it's not just Kenya alone. When we were having the sessional paper, Uganda on the other side, they were having the Common Man's Charter. Tanzanians were having the Arusha Declaration 1967. So you find that as countries and neighboring states, we have always been having an agenda. And as it is said, a good idea will always make way for a better idea. We had Vision 2030. We might have not achieved as much as we wanted by then, but we've made a step forward. And now, being a good idea, it is right time for it to step aside and give way for other conversations. Now they are beyond 2030. And this still, my brother Wakili mentioned about the Vision 2060, which aligns with the Agenda 2063 of the African Union, the Africa we want. And you find that this incorporates all the aspects that we need for our economic development, political and social development. So I strongly believe that it is a right conversation at the right moment.
Franklin, are we going, because this should be a national conversation. It is intended to be a national conversation, but are we going to be honest about how we undertake this conversation in as far as development and the direction that the country wants to take is concerned?
Mike, I want to say that it is fantastic to have a vision, and Vision 2060 is a fantastic vision. But the question is, are we ready for the vision? Let me take you back to Vision 2030. We had 3 pillars. The first pillar is economic. Have we exhausted when it comes to economic part? Have we tried to build Mama Mboga? Have we tried to build the youths? We still have a gap that we need to fix. Let's talk of health. Do we still have good health facilities? Our children, our pregnant mothers are still having issues of children dying in the hospital. I mean, there's a big gap that we need to fix as a country. And there's this for social pillar. You see, the youth are still complaining. They are jobless. There's gender equality. The people are still fighting out there because of resources. When it comes to political pillar, there's no transparency. There's no accountability. So I believe this is a gap that we need to fill for 2030 first, before we rush to 2060. Assuming you are going to Mombasa, you have to go through Mombasa Road, because life is a journey, and a vision is like a journey. You go step by step, you move one day at a time, you implement something that we've talked about, and again, you make things work. So I think it's time first we focus on completing the first assignment, which is Vision 2030.
So in other words, we need to take stock of what 2030 has been able to accomplish and the gaps that we have failed to fill.
Exactly, because we are rushing to achieve a goal, and we have not completed our first goal that we had input as a country.
Wakili, there's something you said, and based on what the president had said during his special address, he did say that, you know, we need a long-term framework that survives individual presidents, individual governments, and even election cycles. Should a vision like 2060, we are now looking at it beyond 2030, should it be anchored in the constitution, in law, to ensure that whoever comes up with any manifesto, regardless of their political affiliation, aligns with the vision that the country has?
Thank you so much. You know, a plan, like I mentioned, a plan stems from somewhere. A plan, for you to develop a plan, there are constitutional requirements for that. For that structure. One of it is the public participation, and that is actually what is being done today. Regardless of whatever political side you are expected to bring in your input into the development of a vision. So the implementation of these visions must also be in accordance with the Constitution. And anything that is against the Constitution is to be declared null and void. You could be having very brilliant ideas, but without following the process, the due process, the law, then all is in vanity. That is why there are very good things that have been declared unconstitutional, not because of the content or the substance, but because of the process, the procedural defaults. Looking at how then can we have Vision 2030, you see, we have a problem. And our problem is not a vision. Our problem is in the implementation. And it's not complete failure of the implementation. We have to give credit where it's due. One, as much as there are so many misses in the 2030 vision, which we intend to salvage, one thing that must be very clear is that there are frameworks on accountability in the Constitution. So that if there is the plunging of public resources, there are also institutions that are meant to deal with such vices. Number two is the shortness or the changing political terrains. In Kenya, unlike other countries, our politics is not issue or ideology based. It's majorly on interest based. So that when a politician comes into power, his concentration is in the retention of power, either getting a second term, and of course there are allies who either walk out and new allies come, who perhaps have to be accommodated into the government. So most of the concentration is not on the implementation of a manifesto or of a vision, but it's in surviving politically. So that has been a very great challenge. The political bad manners in this country has really costed us. For example, in 2022, the current president had a plan, And his plan, he crafted it together with Rigathi Gachagua, who was the then deputy president. He had very many allies. But coming to 2024, things changed. Those who had come up with a framework to develop the manifesto of the UDA government and at large the Vision 2030, because it's a work in progress. But if it's infrastructure, there are things that are politically instigated. There are roads, there are areas that are getting roads for the first time. For example, if you've seen on the social media, for the first time there is a road being constructed at Sindo, where I come from. And of course we've been in we have been in this. We got independence from 1963. We've never seen any tarmac road from that time. But it's because of the political alignment that now we are getting a road for the first time. So that if you are misaligned politically, then you miss on very key developments. That's the same thing. Right now we are talking about the ODM faction joining government.
Yes.
And right now those who are opposing this government, assuming they get power, and that's why I always talk and stand for the law, not for political sides. Of course, we have to be politicians in one way or the other, because politicians or political parties are formed to get power. But one thing is that when the reality checks in, when there is a new government in place, and now the responsibility squarely lies on them, most likely the alliances that you see today will not be there. Look at Senegal. Those who came together, the president and the former prime minister who came together to form a government, just 2 years, in fact less than a year into that election, they are reading from different scripts. So that political bad manners, if we could get a framework of getting a ministry, actually a ministry for the implementation of that Vision 2060. And it is well targeted, and there are watchdogs to look at it within the confines of the Constitution, then it can survive politics. It can survive politics. Next year, we are getting into an election. And the reason as to why there is the debate of whether this government should discuss it or this government should discuss it is basically a question of which political side do you support. But when we look at it objectively, it is the role of the government, not the politicians. And who is the government right now? The government is led by the executive, which is led by the current president, and they have that responsibility. That is why when there is abduction, we do not ask Sifuna. We do not ask Matiang'i. We ask the president. We ask Kipchumba Murkomen. When there was shooting, when Rigathi Gachagua released a press conference, he actually addressed Kipchumba Murkomen. Why? It's because the responsibility, the buck stops
with the government.
With the government.
And, you know, Purity, if we are having a conversation, are we able, if, for instance, let's say we are talking about Vision 2060 as a country, are we able to look at it objectively, regardless of which political side we support?
Mike, I have to be honest with you. It's a very tainted, we're looking through tainted glasses. Definitely, because it is being led by the political class, it definitely will become a political conversation. That cannot be separated from the conversation. And then again, we have seen political rhetorics being used in the name of national development, but in the end it crumbles behind a lot of scandals. And I'd say one of the conversations that should be had is intergenerational equity. We are carrying the burden, and we will carry the burden of debt that did not belong to us. And yes, they might say that infrastructure had to be built, but at the end of the day, we all know that that infrastructure also became a money-making scheme. And so we are going to be carrying over injustices, we're going to be carrying over debts that did not belong to us. 2060, we will be the CSs, the PSs, the presidents of that vision. And so the conversation has to be now also in terms of ownership. Who is owning this conversation? because we will be called for these rallies, and that is what has become the clarion call, basically just using youth for tokenism and paternalistic exploitation. And then at the end of the day, when things happen and real conversations are had, we're discarded. We're 75% of this conversation, but at the end of the day, what we want is ownership of the conversation. It shouldn't be a top-down approach. Vision 2030 came when a lot of young people were still young, and in fact, I do believe there's a gap, a knowledge gap as to what exactly it entailed as a whole in totality. This is ours to write. And in as comfortable as it sounds, uncomfortable as it sounds, we might actually have to remove politics out of a conversation like this. Because at the end of the day, we are the vision bearers, we will be the burden carriers, we will be the ones to deal with a country either broken or restored. Yeah.
And from a political science perspective, you know, how realistic is it to expect that the successive governments will honor this long-term vision when we live at a time when political incentives are tied to a 5-year cycle? Is it possible?
Yeah, it is possible if it is people-owned. If this discussion is ideally the people or rather mass-owned discussion, then it is more realistic to happen rather than if it is owned by a few elites. And the Zambian author Dambisa Moyo, in her book The Dead Aid, you find that the problem that we've been having as Africa is that we've been over-dependent on the external forces. Most of the policies we've been implementing, they have been externally enforced policies. And that's why we are now lamenting about the Vision 2030. We are now talking about the failures of all those ideas or policies that we had discussed before, because you find that majorly there were no conversations, or rather public conversations around them. You are given a booklet and then you have to implement this as a country. For instance, I'll give you an example of the 2015 MDGs, the MDGs, after they failed to be implemented, not just in Kenya, but in even other African countries. We then had the SDGs, which are also supposed to be ending in 2030. But you find that we are still not at par as at what was given for us to implement. And that is why I feel like it's very critical, it is very timely that as a nation, I mean, we all go to the table, discuss this, and contribute to its implementation as a people. And not that a few elites sat in a room somewhere, came up with a document, and then we are being called upon to implement whatever is being thrown at us. It is just as someone can give you... I remember when we were growing up, my dad could take a stick whenever it was almost Christmas period, and then he will take the measurements of my shoe size, go to the shop, and then come with the exact shoe that fits me, because it will fit me because the discussion of this agenda. Emmanuel, you need a shoe, bring yours, and everything. Rather than my dad going to the shop and coming with a shoe, it will either fit or it won't fit me. So I feel like it can be only implemented if the masses, or rather the Kenyans, the public, are involved at the formatory stages.
Very important point there, because there's a question that comes. Are we starting on a positive or a different footing as opposed to when we started Vision 2030? That is what we are going to examine once we come back from this short break. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to Good Morning Kenya. We're talking about the national conversation beyond 2030. Now, Magoba made a very interesting point there. And Franklin, I want to rope you in on this. When you look at how we started Vision 2030 and how now we are starting the conversation around Vision 2060, would you say we are starting on a different footing where the president is calling on the nation to sit down, reflect, and just chart the way forward regarding the development of the country?
I think, Mike, the president has a vision for the country, which is good.
Yes.
And everyone has a vision. Where you work, you have a vision, where you want to be.
Yes.
At home, you have a vision where your family wants to be. But the question is, how do we achieve the vision? And I want to I want to believe that everyone has a role to play in Kenya vision, either 2030 or 2060. Why am I saying that? Because we cannot achieve a vision without working as a team. And we need everyone to come and play his or her role to achieve this vision. I'll give an example. We have NGOs. They have a key role in helping us achieve visions here in the country. We have foundations. We have CBOs. We have political leaders. We have churches. We have stakeholders everywhere. So I believe achieving something, people have to come together, have a common goal, and work towards it. Because there's no way the government can achieve this vision alone.
Yes.
And that's why they are calling upon people or stakeholders to come and help achieve this goal. So it is achievable if we decide to speak one language and work toward that language. Yeah.
Speak in one language.
Yeah.
And Purity, you know, most of the young Kenyans will live much of the vision 2060. Do you think, are there safeguards that needs to be put to ensure that today's youth do not simply, are not simply used to endorse a vision, but have a meaningful role in ensuring that this vision is achieved?
I think the answer is very simple. We have mentioned the political class, the elite. Let's just talk about it as a government. The government needs to be a listener, a good listener. I think we are at a backdrop of a heartbroken country. There's people grieving their children, mothers grieving their sons, young people that have been disillusioned by the education dream, the Mwai Kibaki dream of free education and the promise of formal employment. There's young people who struggle to believe that anything good can come from Serikali. And so we have to cover the backlog first. We are in a place where we have to rebuild trust before we talk about a vision to begin with. Do we have a plan for the country? Yes. But we are standing on a very fractured foundation. And so what the conversation is, number one, if this vision is to happen, it should be binding. There should be a binding implementation framework. Because Vision 2030 became a shifting goalpost for every political campaign. There was the campaign that Uhuru came in with, the Big Four agenda, and then with Ruto came the bottom-up economic transformation. Even within those frameworks, you still find that we're unable to meet the threshold. And so what happened was Vision 2030 was at the backdrop of whatever new wave that they had to manufacture to rally the crowds. And I think at the end, we all need to have, and that is why you find there's a lot of policy inconsistency. Things shift, even with education, for example. 3 years ago, we had NFM. Now, in the next week or 2 weeks, we'll be having a new structure. And it fractures the processes as they go along. And you can imagine something as basic as education, where children are involved. There's a lot of inconsistency. How so? In any other factor of life, whether it be employment creation, job creation, youth development fund, vocational training as a whole. And so, if anything, this should come from the people first, not top down. Vision 2030 was top down. And I see the same happening with Vision 2060. And what will happen is the political class will end up leading in a vacuum.
So if it has to come from the people, how is that going to happen from bottom up, going instead of top down?
Number one, you'd have to realize that it is not like the Kenyans have not been speaking. They've been speaking for a long time. I think the conversation is, how do we channel it? How do we remove the crown, remove the jewels, remove the robe, and come down to the people and have an honest conversation? And also acknowledging wrongs. I think that's a problem. We walk over as if nothing happened. And so it is about, where are we at now? What is your grievances? I had mentioned this before. There was a time we had a conversation on NFM, and we had told the PS at the time, she had brought student leaders together, that this model is not going to work. 3 years down the line, we have more people unable to join university because of the fear of a fee above 100 and 200,000. And even so, even in my capacity, I have had to take people to help myself, to advocate for at least for them to do the exams, because they have fee balances of more than 500,000. And these are people who are coming from rural areas, some who are even orphans. If anything, we have spoken. They have called us to barazas. You have seen things like Jukwaa or Salama happening. They call us upon the stage over and over, time and time again. We say the things that hurt us the most. It is about action now. It is action, if anything, that will speak for them.
Yes, Wakili, you know, there's acknowledgement that when it comes to Vision 2030, there are places we have lagged behind, and also we have been compared to countries who have been able to achieve economic success, for instance, China, South Korea, and the like. But what do we need to confront? Why have we repeatedly failed to turn our potential into comparable economic success?
Thank you so much. I think there should also be a comparison in the region, how Kenya has done. And Kenya has done fairly well as compared to its neighbors. But that notwithstanding, we are a country governed by the Constitution. And I would highly recommend that Vision 2060 should not just be looked at in terms of the GDP.
Yes.
It must be measured against, as against the national values, which is Article 10 of the Constitution, which is the rule of law, public participation, which my sister has actually mentioned. How then do we include the public into this national conversation? How do we pick their thoughts? How is it included in a vision? Of course, it should not also be lost on us that the sovereignty can either be exercised directly or indirectly. The Constitution and the law as it is presumes that when you elected your member of parliament, you sent him to speak on your behalf in the national discussions, that is either in the Senate or in the National Assembly. Number two, when you elected your member of county assembly, the law presumes that you donated your power so that where you cannot access, including the parliament, to air out your issues, you should be able to pick up your grievances and submit them in the implementation, and they should be included in the laws. So that is number one. Number two, we also have to check on the excesses of the executives. And before we look at the excesses of the executives, we also have to look at it vis-a-vis separation of power. The Constitution is very clear on the roles of each and every stakeholder or arm of government, including the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature, which comprise of the National Assembly and the Senate. So if we have to be very candid with how we do things, one of the things that must be corrected is the capture of the National Assembly and, of course, the executive. The executive should be there to help the president and be independent. That is why the Constitution was very deliberate in having professionals as members of the executive. Actually, they should not hold any political seat.
Yes.
They should majorly or entirely be ministers. Unlike in the old Constitution, where one would be a minister and at the same time
a member of parliament.
So there should be that independence. But right now there is no independence and there is a lot of capture. So if there is capture of any arm of the government, then there is a likelihood that something somewhere will lag. Why? Because there is no accountability and there is no oversight. Because if there is a vision, if there is a budget, if there is a constitution, if there is a law, there should be a body. Actually, there is a body that is tasked with the mandate of ensuring that there is clear oversight. The other thing is development. And one thing I love about the 2010 constitution, it brought about the devolution. You see, in the old dispensation, there was this common say that siasa mbaya maisha mbaya. So that if you were not in government, of course the narrative of shares, if you were not in government, then you did not have shares in the government. Then it meant that you should be locked out completely from any development. But now with devolution, there is an equitable share of each and every county, an allocation. And you see, now the main problems that we had in the National Assembly, they trickle down. So that we pump money into devolution, but they go in financing individual lifestyles. How many governors have been impeached because of corruption? How many governors are battling with corruption cases? How many MPs, even though the law is very clear that NGCDF is independent, but they have decided to click and cling on it, and they still have their pictures embedded on public structures constructed using public resources. How do you draw the balance? And they still use it as a campaign tool. So we should have a very clear line between the vision, the constitution, and the individuals. And this can only happen if institutions are allowed to work. Independent institutions, for example, are they independent? Are they independent? They should be independent. There is one scholar, and that is something that is very peculiar in our country. We have very many laws, but without following those laws. In law, we call it constitution without constitutionalism. We have very good policies, but when it comes to the implementation of these policies, we are totally clueless, or we totally ignore them. So that is something that we also need to look at. The other thing is Chapter 6 of the Constitution. Leadership and integrity we cannot succeed without implementing Chapter 6 of the Constitution, Migwi. Because why do we have it in the Constitution? It's because we wanted a country that is governed by people with integrity. And the integrity should not just be that which is said, it should be seen. We've had people with, candidates with very questionable characters contest, some with even questionable degrees from questionable institutions. They are cleared, they contest. There are people with cases in courts. They misuse the judicial systems to stay in power. Of course, as a lawyer, if I will speak for the law, is that you are presumed innocent until proven guilty. That means that you still have the mandate to proceed and to defend whatever you believe is right without being presumed guilty, even if it is in the public domain. A clear example, for example, if you are accused of murder, you take plea, you are released on bail, you go back to be a governor, you go back to be a president, you go back to be a member of parliament until 5 or 10 years when you shall be found guilty of an offense. You shall have done wonders. That is why there is a lot of there's a lot of problem with the scams that you see, the gold scams. They squander a lot of money from individuals and unsuspecting individuals. Then they use the same money to pay for the bail, which is a constitutional right. And after paying for that bail, they bomb another place, and it is a cycle. So why can't we look at the integrity? That's the last thing I want to say, Migwi. There is one I don't know whether it's a politician, no, Matiang'i. He mentioned in the run-up to 2022 elections that most of the candidates who are vying were actually wash-wash. I think it's in public records. It's in the public domain. It's something that is in the, I think I can't actually pick where it was, but he categorically said it. Then he was a minister for internal security. Why? And some of these candidates were cleared to run. So how then are you going to achieve a Vision 2060 using, or with the implementers being with very questionable integrity? So we have to look at the Constitution before we look at any implementation of even a vision, even any law. We have to go back to the Constitution.
Very important.
That is where, and that is the only way we will be able to succeed with any vision, including post-2060.
Because when we talk about a vision, you know, the matters of integrity have to play a role, as Wakili is saying. But are we able to look at it constructively and, you know, pay attention to what the Constitution says about Chapter 6, and even as a country, as a people, elect leaders who align with the Chapter 6? Are we able to do that?
I believe we are able to do that. One thing I know about Mike is structures. When we have clear structures, it helps organize anything, anywhere. Okay? Let's say, for example, have we ever thought of having KPIs for our leaders? Key performance indicators. For example, when we choose a leader, we're looking at integrity, accountability, more so anything positive about our leader. Then how do we account for their action? Let's say we have a structure like a board that is governing them. And we give them a KPI. We can do a weekly KPI, monthly KPI, and yearly KPI. And we see this week, what has this leader done to us? This month, what has this leader done to us? Same to this year. And then we question them. We give you a clear structure that this week we want this to be done. By the end of the year, we need this to be done. And if you're able to achieve the KPIs, then you're the leader we want. You're the leader we want to walk the journey with. So you find most of the time we don't have KPIs for our leaders, and that's why it's very difficult to ask them questions. So they'll just come to enjoy na stories out.
But are the KPIs contained within the manifestos?
Of course, they are there, but Wakili has been talking about implementation. There's a gap in implementing. So if we can have a structure that can help us implement these things, it would be very, very useful to us as wananchi.
Would that work when we are talking about a vision that extends beyond the point at which we are?
As he was talking about that, I just thought, does our political culture really shows this? Because we've seen the integral people with clear self-track records, rarely do they even get to ballot level, or perhaps they'll get there and get very miserable number of votes that they will never want to vie again. An example, well, it's in public record, so maybe I can just use this. We all know the record of Patrice Loch Otieno Lumumba, PLO Lumumba. In one of his speeches, he says I think he was vying somewhere in Nairobi, spoke so well, told them what he will do very eloquently. But at the end of the day, Mheshimiwa, you said this, but how are you leaving us? Unatuachaje? And with that alone, PLO Lumumba never made it to the parliament. And you find that as a people, we've embraced such a bad political culture. And that's why even as we speak about these issues, the number one thing we need to cleansen is our political behavior. Money appears to have taken over our political spaces. in that you cannot do nothing without money. And I feel like that should be point number one for us to get to the integrity, to chapter 6. Because as Wakili says, someone will come with questionable money, he will give us, people will clap, celebrate. They won't even look at the policies. When they get to ballot, you'll hear someone saying, I've eaten 100 bob from this one, let me cast my vote in his favor. And I think if we have maybe to look at that culture, maybe as an example, Kalau will then be used in this case. But still, that does not justify what the political culture looks like, because we have over 290 constituencies. That was just one. So I feel like we first of all need to come to realization that we have a very poor political culture, and we need to change that for us now to start a better way of moving forward. And I also wanted to speak on a point on the public participation.
Yes.
She had mentioned that. I strongly, it appears that in this country, we do not have public participation practically, but then we participate in public with completely zero impact. I mean, a number of times, and 2024 should be an example to this. We go to these halls, the jukwaas and all those sittings. You speak eloquently, you really feel your country. You remember the guy at Bomas, the people shall and the people may. You're so passionate about your country, but whatever is read out after the all document has been compiled and concluded, you find it's exact opposite of what you people submitted.
So reducing the whole exercise to a formality.
Yes. Actually, that is the right term, formality. And so as my good friend Ken Babu says, it's like we just participate in public and not public participation at all. So I feel like it's also a part that we really need to embrace and fulfill it, not just theoretically, but even practically.
Purity, as a country, are we able to call us, as a people, regardless, politics aside, politicians aside, as a people, are we able to call ourselves to account when it comes to matters of accountability and the kind of politics we want to drive beyond 2030?
I have had the privilege of moving around, and I tell you, Kenyans are one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. And I'd say that intelligence sometimes is to a detriment. Tunakuanga wajanja sana. And I like also the comments that they've mentioned, and it's true. Impunity begets impunity. Our leaders don't come from Uganda or Tanzania; they're ours. And so in this instance, we have good people out there, that I will say, within the political sphere, within governments, within institutions, that still stand for what is integral. As Kenyans, kujita mkutano is very true. It is needed. When the conversation was happening in 2024, where we were saying we were tribeless, we were leaderless, we were everything, unfortunately, Kenyans were not tribeless. And that I say even with young people. I have done politics in University of Nairobi, and I can tell you for sure that we are still not fully tribeless. We are still leaderless, I understand, especially because we have such a deep distrust, and you see it even with social culture. One influencer does something, and the next thing you know, we've shifted posts, we want to cancel them. I think there's just that distrust to a point where we want to now self-govern, self-autonomy. And that is why when he mentioned about having people having KPAs and having a board, it just feels like we're trying to regulate the regulators and continue to climb it up until we're... And it's just because of a lack of trust in each other. I think... And what happens is also a lot of the political class, basically, people enter political positions without the capacity. I think there's people who know how to do politics really well. They game the sport of rallying up the masses and winning an election. What happens after is where we have tragedies upon tragedies. the challenge you have with Kenyans is that they fall for euphoria. We like the euphoria. The 10 or 10, there's a... Yeah, and then we also sometimes treat politics like sports. Ukiona timu moja inakaa kuanguka, you go. You shift.
Isn't that detriment to having issue-based politics?
And it is, and I dare say it is. But can I tell you, what happened in 24 was an awakening of national consciousness. We'll have a conversation on meritocracy. Do we have people who still fall for the euphoria? Yes. But I promise you, right now we're taking a lot of promises with a pinch of salt. And I think that is the beginning of a good conversation. Will we get there? Yes. But I believe it has to start with us. We can't be pointing fingers to the political class if we too don't stand for anything and we fall for nothing.
You have to introspect.
Exactly.
Yes.
But the consciousness has been awakened. We can't speak of integrity when we are not an integral people.
Yeah.
And it has cascaded all the way down. Politics has become about tokenism. Unapata mwanasiasa, the next thing you know, mheshimiwa, nimelala njaa, mheshimiwa, this and this. Do they have the prerogative? Yes. But you need to understand, I think Kenyans need to understand that we need to let leadership be leadership. Sometimes we treat our politicians like our village elders. And what that means, you dump everything upon them. And the financial expectations that politicians have, even over campaigns, you hear someone having a budget of over 100 million to vie for a certain county. That money, most of it is going kwa mfuko ya mtu. Yeah? Not even campaign branding or anything. And that is why you're seeing even, NCAC, also IBC was talking about the budget, the campaign budget. The conversation has started, and I'm glad that young people are willing to challenge each other and ourselves and even our parents.
Yes.
Yes.
We shall come to that part. But yes.
Yeah.
We continue with this conversation regarding matters that regard Vision 2060 and beyond 2030. Thus, what you're seeing on your screens are the proceedings happening at the KICC, where the launch of the National Conversation Beyond 2030 is set to happen. And we shall be bringing you live updates of the events as they unfold. There you can see the national conversation, very important, that as a country we need to take in as far as the direction that we want this country to head is concerned. We're going to take a very short break for this conversation. We shall continue with this conversation with my panelists as time goes by, and we shall be bringing you that live coverage of that event. Welcome back. We are still having a conversation regarding the national conversation beyond 2030. The events of that launch are as you are seeing on the screen, and we shall be bringing you live updates of that. But Wakili, still on matters of accountability, we know we are not short of plans we have implemented, we have come up with before, but as you put it, implementation has always been a problem. It has been affected by a myriad of things. So what happens if those responsible for Vision 2060 fail to implement it?
And my question is, who are those who are responsible for the vision? We the people. and we the people have donated these powers to our leaders. That is the president in the executive, and the president in turn appoints the cabinet secretaries. We've donated our powers to the members of parliament, and we've donated our powers to the members of the county assembly and of all the leaders. So we are the implementers, actually, of the Vision 2030. And of course, there are those roles that are well cut out in the Constitution and designated for key personnel or key institutions. So if these institutions, like I mentioned, can be independent and uphold the constitution, then implementing a vision or any other agenda, and even the constitution, will not be a matter of, it will not be a difficult thing. It will be very seamless and it will be very easy. The only problem, and I think the reason as to why most of these things are not achieved, it's because of our traditional approach, where each and every administration comes up with an agenda. We should treat a vision as a national development compact, so that this vision leads the framing of our manifestos. So that any manifesto, for example, that is against the constitution and against a vision that a country has settled on should be shunned upon. The other thing is that we should have phases of implementation of a vision. For example, we have now the Vision 2060. What are the key what are the key pillars of this Vision 2060? And then we can divide it into a 5-year plan. Then that 5-year plan gets into the annual budgets. Then from the annual budgets, then we have what my brother was saying, measures and indicators. Then we have independent monitoring. And independent monitoring may be a commission, but how many commissions have we formed, Migwi? And how many conversations? I was joking during the break that just recently we had a NADCO, was it National Conclave? We have had
intergenerational conversation.
We have had intergenerational conversations. We have had the NADCO, which was led by Kimani Ichung'wah and SK Kalonzo Musyoka, and they were geared towards uniting the country. And in the process of uniting that country, politics came in, and right now those who are heading and leading the conversation are reading from different scripts. So how then do we protect ourselves from political interests? Because politicians and politics have one thing, and of course it's the framework. Politicians have a way of branding and painting their personal interest to appear as though it is public interest. And we also must remember, rather not remember, but regret that politics in this country is ethnic-based. And that's why when a push comes to a shove, most of these politicians, they run back to their tribesmen, and they build their base. And their base become their bargaining currency. So when they sit down in government, Gachagua will say that I have the whole mountain with me. So it will not matter how you bring them together. What matters is, do you have the numbers that you can bring on the table? And once these numbers come in, they come in with their interests. That now it is, we formed this government, for example, we need this. So instead of even distribution of resources, which is within the Vision 2030 or Vision 2060, now we are talking about Vision 2060, the president or the executive or the political class, they retreat back to their own selfish interests and the interests of their communities, and they abandon the greater good. So that we are only one when we are collecting taxes, when we are paying housing levy, when we are doing, but when it comes to developments, it is our people. And if we are able to deal with this, then I think that will be a good. The other thing is parliamentary oversight. And that's why I was respectfully disagreeing with my brother, that even if we have an independent oversight body that is created specifically for 2060 vision, still it will not achieve much. Because in the Constitution, we already have Parliament as an oversight body. And they should do it not as a favor, but as a constitutional responsibility. But we have politicians who are shifting goals. A classic example, is that in the 2024 finance bill, for example, those who voted the finance bill, those who actually were spearheading so many, actually they were leading the conversations. are now the spokesmen of Linda Mwananchi. Karoli voted, for example, Karoli Omondi, who is the spokesman of Linda Mwananchi. He voted for the finance bill. We, the Suba people, refused. We protested. But against our wish, he went and voted for the finance bill. Today, the same youth, who is their spokesman, is the Karoli. The political bad manners and political self-interest that is carved so that we are comrades. You know, comrades, we don't love each other. We only come together because we are fighting a common enemy.
The interests align.
The interest. So once that common enemy is gone, then we remain clueless. The same thing. So after all this is done, we do not want to look at, for example, Sifuna, what have you done in Nairobi in your role as a senator? We do not want to look at Karoli. What have you done in the past and currently? We do not want to look at, for example, Junet Mohammed. We only look at them from the lenses that favor us. So if we look at it from that point, then we miss it out. That is why I told you that the more things they change, the more they remain
the same.
The same. Next year, probably and most likely, whoever wins, there will be a handshake. And there will be, from that handshake, there will be casualties who will either walk out of government and protest, and immediately, just within 2 years, they will either be stating 2-term or finish and go.
We'll go back to the campaign mode
if
that
Ruto
we
wins,
always are.
There will be people who will be going there, finish and go. If maybe Sifuna, Matiang'i, or whoever person wins, in just 2 years, 1 term.
But
it's because of the political bad manners.
I strongly believe the reason as to why this should be a people-centered agenda. This should be a people-owned vision rather than political elites. Because as he mentions individuals, I also believe there also exists good leaders. I mean, there exists people like P.S. Makoha, Boniface. I don't know even if you people hear about him, because these are kind of individuals, Makoha, Belio, who are always in rooms drafting, designing, and making sure that whatever has been discussed, it is documented towards now implementation. But then now that is where Parliament comes in, and I tend to agree with him on the implementation. They selectively implement what appears to be favoring them at the expense of the public. So I feel like there is also need to appreciate those who make efforts to ensure that things are done in ways they are supposed to be done. And just a clarion call to the young people. I feel like we should not just be beneficiaries. We need to be co-authors of this, because I believe that each generation has their role to play. Just like the analogy of a fruit tree, one generation plants it, another generation waters it, and then whoever will benefit from these fruits, it's completely different generation. The Kenyatas of this nation played their part. The tomboyers played their part. It is now upon us who are now existing, and more so the young people, the energetic generation of this nation, that we need to take this positively, number one, because if we take it as a negative thing at the inceptual stage, how will we ever implement it? We will remain living in denial.
Yes.
So I strongly believe it is a conversation that we need to put our minds together and charter our ways, just as Chinua asks, where are the young suckers that will grow when the old banana tree dies? So we are those people that perhaps will take up the Vision 2060. May it not be a shock that some of us here will be on those tables now implementing what we are starting to converse here today. So I strongly believe that we have some good individuals, and I strongly believe we can actually support them to ensure that whatever we discuss for the betterment of our nation is indeed what is incorporated.
Yes.
Just as I conclude, right now, world is moving technologically. And even in our economy, we are moving, we are having a digital economy. I mean, we need to have this conversation, and it is us, the young people, who are mostly involved in digital economy.
Yes.
We need to bring the challenges we are facing so that we can see the solution in that document,
Yes.
rather than being at side shows, leaving the peoples in 60s, 70s whose interaction with modern world is a bit not so good to decide for us what has to be done.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are going to continue with this conversation, but I want us to cross over to KICC